On today's show, Jacob Chychrun and the Capitals drop the curtain on the Bolts in overtime.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals as they pick up an overtime victory over the Lightning. How did they get it done? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about the game, the grit, and the heroes. And then in the final segment, where do the Capitals go next? But just to get it going here, wow, talking about a game in October that definitely had the feeling of a playoff game, didn't it? Did it have the physicality? It had the pushback that we are really early in the season. But yet some bad blood between these two teams. And then there's Russian players on there. And you could tell that Ovechkin and players on the Lightning were talking back and smack back and forth with each other, that it was quite a game. And all things considered, a nice team victory. When you watched it, Alex Ovechkin got a shot in and you're like, yes, wow, the offense is it's humming along here. But then it waned for the Capitals. They had to kind of get their sea legs underneath them as the Lightning really poured it on. And the good thing about the Capitals in this particular game is somewhat similar to what we saw from them last year, is they had that pushback. Right, that this is a different Capitals team than we had seen a few years ago, where, when there was any pushback, they kind of just, their heads receded into the shell and just like, tell me when it's over. Tom Wilson, Chychrun, the players really popped off. And of course, Logan Thompson between the pipes was huge. Let's dive into it here in this segment here. And wow, what a game. You're talking about the Capitals getting some shots in there, but the Lightning, while they are the ones that got on the board first, Jake Guentzel, now a member of the Bolts, scores off a face-off type play there. It was more of a shot to him there. And, Jake Guentzel is not, one of the bigger guys on the ice, but he is definitely a guy that really eats it up in the center of the ice, kind of the slot area there. And, despite the fact that he is not a bigger man, still an elite level hockey player, in my opinion. Just a clean win back and boom, shot through traffic. It's 1-0 Bolts. And, watching the game, there's nothing that Thompson could really do there. If you take a look at it, it was near, I guess I'm trying to recollect, it was near the blue line. It was shot over to Guentzel and he shot it. So it would have been Logan Thompson just getting over so fast that I think most netminders would not have made that save. Even though I'm going to go ahead and say that Chucky's save in the last game before was pretty impressive. But and for the most part, that first period, it kind of felt like Tampa had the edge, save that first shot by Alex Ovechkin. That I think that, the coach Cooper there for Tampa, he really has that team dialed in, and there's a reason that he's been behind the bench for so long, that he is able to adjust. And he sees the matchups and these kind of things. And like I said, in the first period, in the latter half of the first period, it was definitely mostly all Bolts. They were cycling the puck well. The Capitals felt like they were chasing. And that's never a good look for the Capitals when they're chasing it. That's not their brand of play. But you could sense that really, oh boy, Here we are on another slow start. It's creeping in here that I thought, really early, and maybe I'm the only one that's that way, but the kind of the negativity, especially when the momentum is skewed against the opponent, sometimes those thoughts are like, uh-oh, what kind of night are we in here for? But giving credit to the Capitals, they tightened up and they didn't panic. And we've seen that before. There was a little bit of rust in the first game of the season against the Bruins, but what we saw is the rust coming off. Someone is out there with WD-40 spraying it all over them as they picked up 2 nice wins over the weekend over the Isles and the Rangers. And this win, I'm gonna say a nice win. And I like pushback because it puts your team through its paces, so you can ultimately see what they're made of. It would be nice if they were all 3-4-0 games. It's not realistic. I like some pushback and a team put through its paces. The Capitals did not panic, and they found a way to rise above. And, Thompson made a few key stops to keep it a 1-goal game. That, and that's the unique thing for the Capitals is that they have an excellent option in Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren that, even though they'll get on the board first, it doesn't matter that 9 times out of 10, or darn near 9 times out of 10, it feels anyway, that the net-minding tandem for the Capitals is really dialed in. Then in the second period as well, the tide started to turn. Connor McMichael, and I'll talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois a little bit later in the game, filling in for Dubois, makes a heck of a play. He's skating towards the net, and he looks to see if anyone's behind him, and it's Alexei Protas, and Protas doesn't miss. Wow, he battles below the goal line, spins, and finds Alexei Protas, and wow, that was just like a shot like that. If you blinked, you missed it, but it was like one of those yes moments that Alexei Protas continues to keep dominating. And I say keeps doing it. We're only early into the season, but he is off to one heck of a start. It's going to be really fun to see, how many goals he ends up with by the end of the season. But Protas's 3rd goal of the season, pretty good and just looks dominant out there. And Ryan Leonard, and everyone drinking the Kool-Aid on Protas, saying this guy looks like he's built in a lab, like 6'5" and just built like a you-know-what. And you could feel the bench come alive after that one. And, if you're a lot like me, I came alive at home, stood up and pumped the fist, and everyone's looking at me like, are you okay over there? But it was one of those really cool moments. And that was a big moment for Connor McMichael as well, proving that he can handle those tougher assignments, that, he wants to be a center. And the feeling going into this season was that he was going to be kind of the guy at the 3rd line center position. But what do you know? Hendrix Lapierre had a really great camp. In any event, when presented an opportunity like the opportunity tonight, and might be for a bit, I guess it depends on how long that Pierre-Luc Dubois is out, did a really good job centering between Protas and Tom Wilson. Then the 3rd period hits, and it's back and forth hockey, and those are the games that I love. Like I said, lopsided is fun. Just a decisive crunching of the other team is good, but I like a hard-fought battle, and that was definitely the case in the 3rd. Tampa scores on the power play. Braden Point, no surprise there, puts the Bolts up 2-1, and you're thinking, here we go again. This is the first period all over again, but the Capitals had the resolve. They had the pushback, to just really rise above. And, watching the game, the Caps had some trouble converting on the power play lately. Of course, it's been the theme of this show. And at that point, it looked like that might slip away. But this time, Tom Wilson says, not today. He gets the tip on the Dylan Strome shot. Another one of those fist-pumping moments. There were a few. The fights, the pushbacks, the tip-ins, the Connor McMichael to Alexei Protas, the Jacob Chychrun overtime goal. If this does not get your hockey blood flowing, I don't know what will. But, like I said, Tom Wilson tipping that Dylan Strome in, bang, tie game, and you're thinking to yourself, we're in it. We are still in this game. And taking a look at Tom Wilson, that's 2 points for Wilson already, and a massive momentum swing. Another one, and it's one of those things that, sometimes teams do, like if your team isn't playing well, they'll switch the goalies just for a momentum change. That there was just snapshots in this game. I'm talking Wilson, Protas, Chychrun, that just really ignited the bench. And I think that oftentimes, I know as a matter of fact, the teams really feed off of those kind of things. And credit to Stromer there too. He's been quiet, and been the heartbeat of this team in a lot of these comebacks. But I think that he's just kind of finding his stride here as well. But then there's always, when we're watching this game, there's always the thing like, oh, great, they tied it. And oh, yep, here we go. We're out of time. It's going to overtime. And, sometimes the Capitals get burned in these games, but not the case in this one. Wilson, beast mode, threads a pass to Jakob Chychrun, and the curtain falls on the Lightning. And what a great win for the Capitals. And this was, most deserving for Jakob Chychrun. It was very fitting for him to get the game-winning overtime goal here, because he was getting pushed around and shoved. And for the most part, I know that, what we missed some of it, and they showed it later, that he showed pretty good restraint. He could have restrained himself a little bit more, but there was an opportunity in this game when Trevor Van Riemsdyk had to step in and kind of help out there that, I'm thinking Chychrun is just going to blow his top and go after this guy. But all things considered, I think that, the Capitals picked their spots. They were physical when they needed to be physical, but they weren't crazy penalties, just blind rage. You've seen that from Tom Wilson. I'm thinking the Panarin thing, where it's just blackout. I'm just mad, and you're going to feel it. That wasn't the case. So I think that, this was a good game, a physical game, a pushback game, the Capitals winning. Those are all things that I love. And at home, you got to love it as well, as the Capitals, despite losing that first game of the season, the Capitals are in a really good position right now. And those are the things to build on here, right? That, as long as they can keep going in this direction, that I think the Capitals are going to have a really great season. I guess time here will only tell. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about how the Capitals won this game. Had a little bit of a game breakdown there, but I'm talking about the game, the grit, and the heroes in tonight's game. I'll break it all down straight ahead. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how using FanDuel gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during the game. Now, listen, on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday, you might have vested interest if the Commanders or the Ravens are playing. But say you want vested interest in all of the games, including the Commanders and Ravens. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about how the game was won. And just looking at what I put on the screen on YouTube, how we won. And I know, people, were you on the ice? Did you skate? Did you play? No, I didn't. But I think that as a fan of a team, I think it is how we won. And I know that it's nothing in comparison to what the guys do out on the ice. I get that. But if you are a Capitals fan, it was definitely a feeling like we did it. the team won. So let's break it down here, a little bit of the nuts and bolts and more to a granular level. How did they get it done here? So, you take a look at the game and what we saw tonight. It was quite a feat by the entire team. It was a team working together. And what we saw tonight, in order for them to get into the win column, was Spencer Carberry. Had to shuffle things up a little bit. And, the players that stood up and how the game was won. Like I said, Connor McMichael slid up to center in that second line position between Alexei Protas and Tom Wilson. And honestly, I like that. It worked very well. I touched on it in the first segment here, but that is something for Spencer Carberry and the Capitals to consider, that, obviously the Capitals would prefer to have pure Luc Dubois playing that second line center position. But Connor McMichael, it's definitely something that I know Spencer Carberry, is going to make note of, that he did a good job, contributing, of course, on that Alexei Protas goal. And, he's not a stranger to playing on that position, or on that line, excuse me, that, he has a history, albeit on the left wing, playing with Protas and Tom Wilson, but definitely something for the Capitals to consider. And, if there is a lack of chemistry, or say that they're just not getting enough production, putting Connor McMichael in the center, especially between those two big bodies, I think is going to work really well. And, talking about Connor, he's been knocking on the door for more opportunity, and this is a good test for him. I really do think that it is. And, just like every other professional sport out there, it is the next man up. And how are you going to impress? Are you going to make the most of your opportunity, or are you going to fold? And, I've talked to people before, and they've said, well, you can't lose your job. You can't lose your job just because someone's injured and you get an opportunity. Oh, yes, you can. Just ask someone like, I don't know, like a Tom Brady or something like that. Very often you can. And I'm not going to say that, Pierre Luc Dubois is going to lose his job. What I am going to say, however, that the centers on the team right now, I guess I'm talking more specifically about Hendrix Lapierre, that I understand he had a great camp, right? But I also know that he was out of one game as well. And I know that that is just Spencer Carberry trying to get different looks. Connor McMichael is going to make it very interesting, that if you're playing up the middle and your game starts to slide a little bit, I think that, Connor McMichael could be definitely a good option. And then you got Hendrix Lapierre, like I said, drawing in, centering the third line between Sonny Milano and Ryan Leonard. And, all things considered, I like that tonight as well. I think that, especially when it comes to Ryan Leonard, he is definitely, finding his groove. Got a goal in the most recent game here, the game over the weekend, and got some good shots in, rang it off the bar. That I think that, that is going to be an interesting storyline to follow as well, because, like I've talked about on this show, I think that it's just a matter of time that he finally got his first NHL goal. I know it's his second, but, his first NHL goal with a goalie in the net. And I think that the confidence that he gained from that game, I think that that is what you saw out on the ice tonight, that it is starting to flow a little bit more easy, that it's not so much gripping that stick so tight. But those were keys to the Capitals winning tonight for sure, is just seeing Connor McMichael big up the middle there. And also that third line looking really well. And, you take a look at that third line in particular, that's an interesting mix in general. You take a look at the second line, save Connor McMichael, big bodies. And when Pierre Luc Dubois is there, I mean, that looks like a line on a football team, to be honest with you. But when you take a look at the third line, what's interesting is you got speed, you got creativity, and a little bit of grit with Leonard. And I'm waiting for that to kick in as well. And, in yesterday's show, I talked about who is going to be the tough guy. And I left Ryan Leonard off of that. because I talked about the importance of Dylan McElrath, right? But I think that what we saw in the game tonight is very telling. And what am I saying? He didn't drop the mitts, but there was some pushback. And, Ryan Leonard definitely does. If you see what he did down in Boston College in different levels, he definitely has some snarl. He has some pushback. I think that, he bulked up a little bit, in the off season. I still don't think he's fully grown into that frame, that I don't want him to be a Tom Wilson 2.0 in the regard that he's got to answer the bell. But I think that he has that flair that once the goal scoring is there, and if he can lean into the physical game, it doesn't necessarily need to be dropping the mitts, but finishing your checks, playing a big role like that. I think that Ryan Leonard could be absolutely huge. But taking a look at the blue line, they played a pretty decent game, all things considered. There wasn't anything too surprising. Faravari and Carlson, Chychrun with TVR, and Rasmus Sandin with Matt Roy. That all things considered, they were put to the test, right? And they were definitely a part of the secret sauce of the Capitals' victory tonight. Make no mistake about it, because, there is, a pretty significant amount of firepower on Tampa. And, if you have any less than stellar blue liners out there, you're going to be exposed. So all things considered, you take a look at it. I think that they did a really good job out there. And, just talking about special teams and standouts in the game. I'm talking about the power play in particular, something that, is a bit of a tough spot for the Capitals. And by no means do I think that they are what I'm going to say off the schneid here, but they are definitely making steps in the right direction. A small baby step in tonight's game, 1 for 3 on the power play. As far as getting shots, they're doing the good thing. Tonight on the game, 28 shots versus the Lightning's 19. And hits, 23 hits by the Capitals versus Tampa's 8. That you saw that. You did see Tom Wilson, a bit of a bull in a china shop, that he was fully engaged. So a big thing for the Capitals in this game is just getting involved. But at the end of the game here, like I said, 28 shots on goal versus the Lightning's 19. Those are things to like. As far as standout players in this game, just talking about the players that had the biggest impact for the Capitals, well, there are a couple standouts. You take a look at Jacob Chychrun, having 4 shots on goal. Like I said, Wilson, Alexei Protas, Chychrun, finding the back of the net, that there was some good contributions by the Capitals. And, taking a look at Logan Thompson, continues to be lights out in net, saving 17 of 19. So all things considered, the Capitals played a dominant game tonight. Dominant, did Tampa have some good pushback? Of course they did. But what I'm saying is like I've said in the show, throughout the duration of it is that it was a team victory, that it wasn't Alex Ovechkin or it wasn't just Logan Thompson. Like we could say, I think in large part the game over the weekend, it was big time Chucky Lindgren is what put the Capitals in the win column. But as far as the game tonight, it was a nice team victory. So now as far as the game plan is concerned, Carberry said before the game that this one was about defending smart and playing the matchups against Tampa's big guns. And all things considered, I think that they answered the bell pretty well. Again, there was some pushback, but the Capitals had the ultimate answer. I'm talking about Chychrun winning it in overtime. So a nice victory for the Capitals, that is for sure. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about what it means going forward. Listen, I said that Connor McMichael played a really good game at the center position. What does that mean for him going forward? And what about the injury to Pierre-Luc Dubois? How do the Capitals adjust? I'll break it all down straight ahead. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. One of the things that I love about Monarch Money, and I think you will too, is you can see where you're spending your money wisely and maybe where you could use a bit more work. And also, if you have a significant other in your life, you can see how to plan your financial future together. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment here, we're talking about what it means going forward. That it was a nice victory tonight, but what does it mean big picture for the Capitals? Well, I think, like I said, it makes it interesting, doesn't it? That you take a look at Connor McMichael playing a big role. How much time is Pierre-Luc Dubois going to miss? Let's dive into that in the final segment of today's show. And, all things considered, a great win by the Capitals. But let's talk about big picture because, this is only one game, but it was a big one. And let's start with the positives. Number one is the depth. No Dubois, no problem. McMichael steps up, big game, Protas scores, LaPierre gets meaningful minutes. That's the kind of depth you need in this league if you want to contend. And, when we talk about the center position, there was some concern. Primarily, I don't think that there was a lot of concern. First, second, fourth, buttoned up. The third was a bit of a concern. For me, despite what we saw in the preseason by Hendricks LaPierre, there was questions if it's sustainable. I still have questions if it's sustainable. Like I said, the measuring stick for me is 10, 12-ish games to see if, it's maintaining. Is it sustainable? Because that has been kind of the biggest knock against him. Has been, the biggest knock against, Connor McMichael before as well, until he finally found his footing and put down a root structure on this team. That I think that Hendricks LaPierre getting meaningful minutes, showing what he has in the tank, but can he continue to do it in the bigger picture? Because they're not, signed, sealed, and delivered on Hendricks LaPierre. He is still going to have to bring it. The other big thing in the game tonight is Tom Wilson's leadership. Never really questioned it. Everyone believes he is the next captain of this team. But what you saw in the game tonight, we talk about this all the time, but when Tom Wilson is engaged, skating and playing that mix of skill and physicality, and how well the team feeds off of it, he leads by his example. He leads by his scoring. He leads by finishing his checks and just being an all-around player. When you talk about a complete package for an NHL forward, Tom Wilson is right there. And you saw that. He was big in the game tonight. He wasn't just hitting, he was creating, driving offense, and leading by example. That's a three-point night. That's the game-winning setup. That's what you expect from a guy, at some point that is going to be wearing a C on his jersey. I think that is an easy conclusion to draw, and I don't think is going to catch anyone by surprise. And number four, goaltending. What have we learned? That is the theme and what to expect going forward. If we can continue on this path, I'm feeling good. You know that there's some setbacks. Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's a big deal. Kind of refound his game back in Washington. But, and I know it's a one-game snapshot, but, big things. But number 4 here is goaltending. And, one of the things that I wasn't concerned about this offseason that, a lot of teams are like, well, who's going to be in the mix? And I'm talking some big name teams, Edmonton, and I'm talking Toronto, and there's other teams around the league that they have, an idea about who they want in net. But the Capitals, Logan Thompson, a steady Eddie again, didn't need to stand on his head, but he made the timely saves. The ones that needed to get saved, he saved. Again, he is fallible. He is human, that he's going to make mistakes from time to time. And at the end of the day, what we saw in the game tonight, that is why he is the number 1. But, like everything else, let's talk about areas that need to get cleaned up, because the power play, yeah, they finally connected, but it still has been inconsistent. They got off the schneid, if you will, by getting 1 power play goal. We need to build on that. You take a look at Tampa last year, one of the best special teams in all the NHL. I'm not just talking power play. I'm talking PK and power play. That's why that team is good historically year after year. The Capitals have some work to do in that regard. And talking about that, one timely goal doesn't erase the early struggles. It's good, but you need to see more. The need more movement, more creativity, more quick puck touches. And I'll say this as well, having Wilson net front helps, but I'd love to see more rotation between Strome, Ovi, and Carlson up top too. Why? Get some big bodies up there. You're not going to budge Tom Wilson out of the way. If he's posted up near the net front, you're not going to move him too easy. Then the other thing is the Dubois situation. Day-to-day sounds minor, but we've heard that before. Sonny Milano was never supposed to be as bad as it was last year. Played all of 3 games. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but day-to-day can sometimes turn to week, to month. That if it lingers, the Caps have to decide, do they shift McMichael full-time into that center role, or do they look for a short-term call-up in Hershey? If you're asking me, I'd go ahead with Connor. I have no qualms. I have no reluctance. I think that he would do a job A-okay. Because the big thing is chemistry matters. He has chemistry. He has a history of playing with Wilson, with playing with Protas, that I think that is a good thing. Another thing to keep an eye on is the defensive pairings. Chychrun and TVR look solid, but you can tell Carberry's still tinkering. Questions, TVR, John Carlson, contract years. We don't know what that means after this year, or maybe at some point this season. There's a balance between offense from the back end and staying structured. And look, credit to Chychrun. He's fitting in quicker than a lot of people expected. He's been here a while. I get that. But there was, I think, a real question about, was he going to like playing in Washington? All things considered, he has been a great fit here, and I don't really question if he fits. I just think that, sustainability, and obviously the Capitals were fully vested in him, got that big contract with the team. I think a dynamite addition to the blue line. But big picture here, 30,000 foot view, the Capitals are starting to find their game. You can see their identity forming, responsible, structured, but still dangerous when the opportunities come. That is ultimately what Spencer Carberry's blueprint is. So those are the things to watch forward. Is it sustainable? The Capitals face the Wild next year, and that's a stretch against some tough opponents, teams that will test the structure. Kind of a foregone conclusion that, the Wild, the Kaprizov deal, that they are going to be, I would expect to be in a playoff picture. So another good test coming up on deck here for the Capitals as they face off against the Wild. But all things considered, I'm feeling good. The Capitals picking up a big win. Caps Nation, you should feel very confident about this team and what we saw in the game tonight. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. And now that the hockey season is going, for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.